You are listening to Beyond the Measure, episode 39. Listen as I, a young composer, and my wife, a young choir director, interview other music educators in order to gain insight into their own success in the classroom. We have a lot to learn, and we want you to learn with us. No matter your age, ensemble, or experience, this is the ideal podcast for music educators, composers, and students alike. So join us as we go beyond the measure. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. My name is Christian.
And my name's Kara.
And this is the Beyond the Measure podcast for music educators. This is a show, if this is your first time joining us, where Kara and I, we just interview a bunch of incredible music educators and gain as much insight from them as possible. And our hope is that if you're a music teacher wanting to learn some more incredible stuff from some other people, then this is the show for you. So we hope you enjoy learning as much as we do with our guests on the show. This episode is a second part of an interview we did with Miss Mary Jane Phillips. And so if you haven't listened to the first part, you can go back to last episode and hear the first part of that. But in this part of the interview, we start to learn more about all of the kinds of materials and resources that Mary Jane has created for choir and for middle school level ensembles.
The main thing that she has a lot of book resources that have been published by Hal Leonard and Briley. But more recently, she has a Teachers Pay Teachers, and that has been super helpful for me just for quick resources that I might need. I would just highly recommend for you guys to look at it because she has so many good resources for all to use.
Yeah, she's definitely an asset for the middle school choir realm. That being said, I do want to say before we get going on the rest of the interview, if you're already, if you're on like the band side or the orchestra side and you're already kind of zoning out because you're like, oh, it's just choir. Well, let me tell you right now, she does talk a lot about choral related materials in this, but there's still a whole bunch of great tidbits in there just about classroom management and leadership skills as well, which is still going to be applicable to what you do as an orchestra director or as a band director. So please don't skip over this if you are on that side of the fence, because there's still going to be a lot of stuff that you can glean from this. So, okay, without further ado, we will get on to the second part of our interview with Miss Mary Jane Phillips. In the past few years, and I mean, not just the past few years, I know this over many years, but you've created many materials for the benefit of other teachers to use. And again, like I'm not even a teacher, but I've seen your name on, many different things, whether that's at TMEA, looking through the books, or
oh, you're sweet.
Or
stuff,
or Kara's stuff. I see your name on things, and you're always sharing things on Facebook. Could you tell us, what kinds of materials do you have? I don't know if there's a short answer for that, but give us a glimpse of all that.
When I started, all these years ago in 1989, oh my gosh, I wasn't even born. When I started in 1989, there wasn't a Briley music. We think the PML is small now. You should have seen what the grade 1 and grade 2 lists looked like back then, particularly TB. You think it's short now, you should have seen it then. In fact, almost all of the sight reading music was written by people with instrumental backgrounds, often piano. So if you look at older sight reading books, they all start in the key of C, because that's where you start when you're a pianist, because you don't have to play any black keys, you're playing all the white keys. So everything started in the key of C. When I started teaching, I grew up in movable numbers. And then when I was a junior in high school, my school district moved to movable do. And then in college, I was in movable do. And then I got to Birdville in like 1991, and they were fixed do. So I've done all of it, like all of the things, all of it. But along the way, I was starting to, I'm like, these kids can't sing in C. The boys, it doesn't fit because that's nowhere close to where and the girls, the younger ones can't match pitch on middle C. So if they can't match pitch on middle C, they can't match pitch on tonic. So wait a minute, this is not good. And I started writing things out. And I am, with my lack of piano skills and my lack of, being a B/C, sometimes music theory student, nothing I wrote is difficult because I I can't. Victor Johnson and I were laughing at TCDA this summer about I've written some things for some a cappella boys music that I'm like, it's for like a non-varsity tenor bass choir. I go, it's grade one. I'm trying to get it on the grade one list on the PML for the prescribed music list for those outside of Texas. And I go, but I can't write an accompaniment. And Victor goes, what do you mean you can't write an accompaniment? I go, no, Victor, you know me. I can't write an accompaniment. It would be a an accompaniment that looked like, a bad freshman theory student in college that would get handed back and told to redo it. I can't do that. And Victor laughed. He goes, well, I'm kind of good at that. Do you want me to write one? I was like, oh, that would be great. I can take care of those voice parts, but I cannot write an accompaniment. Over the years, also, I often taught in heavily Title I schools. And with those, one of the things that nobody likes to say out loud, but is true, is there are more kids with more learning disabilities. That comes with poverty. And nobody likes to say it out loud, but it absolutely happens. There are more kids that are dyslexic. There are more kids that have trouble tracking. There are more kids that haven't had a steady elementary. They've hopped schools in elementary. They've been in different housing. And so their reading is not good. And I was noticing that like the size of things mattered, like the size of how it was in a book. So I like went online back in the day when you would like look for staff paper. I went online looking for staff paper that was wider, and I found like a site that had elementary staff paper. So I was like, downloading that. It was these big, wide, instead of little bitty, they were big, wide for elementary kids. And I start writing out things on that, and my kids started getting better at it. And then I was like, oh, well, I'm just going to write things out on this. And so everything was literally, I mean, I couldn't even do finale back then. It was literally handwritten on these wide elementary things. And then over the years, I had a whole file cabinet of it. And like I wouldn't use a lot of pre-printed materials. It was, and like every day, literally, it was the next file folder. Hand it out to the kids, hand it back in. And finally, one day, where it really all started was the SOS books, the one that Laura Farnell and I wrote. And if you've never heard the story, if you've never heard Laura and I tell the story, one spring, we kept judging UILs together, just all over the state. And it was always somewhere we had to fly. And it was a really stormy spring. And we kept getting stuck in airports. Like we'd have, a 3-hour wait to get back to Dallas Fort Worth where we lived. Well, if you put Laura Farnell and I sitting in an airport, what's going to happen is these two choir nerds are going to start talking about sight reading, which we did over and over and over again. And we did lots of the same things. And we're like, we should get all this published in a book. I was telling her about all my little folders and things. She goes, we should get this published in a book. It's like, we should. That would be great. You know a lot about publishing, Laura. Tell me how that would work. She goes, well, I'm going to call Denise Eaton. We were literally in Hobby Airport in Houston, and the airport's full of people. We like stood over in a corner with like the cell phone between us, and we have this idea. And Denise said, send me a couple pages. And when she saw it, she went, I'm going to the higher ups and tell them we are publishing this. And she had to fight for it because they'd never published a sight reading book before. Riley hadn't published books of things before. We wanted there to be 2 books. We wanted there to be a treble and a tenor bass book. And they absolutely would not publish the tenor bass book because they didn't think they'd make any money off of it, which they probably wouldn't because you only make money off of tenor bass stuff in Texas, but that's a whole different publishing thing. But they agreed to put all the tenor bass stuff for free on downloads. Like if you don't know this about the SOS book, you can go to the page on Briley and they'll let you download the whole thing for free. And Denise didn't fight us on anything. She literally didn't change a thing. They had to make new software to make the big wide staffs that it starts off with. They weren't sure about having rhythm and pitch separated, but there it was. And it finally got published. And when it did, it was like, oh, those are our brains in book form. And I'll never forget my friend Julie Moore, who was at Colleyville Middle School forever. And she and I are exactly the same age. We taught together forever. And Julie, the day that the thing was like sitting in Briley, I had like tears in my eyes because I was holding my book. And Julie was going through this. She goes, "This is literally what I do. I just never thought about writing it all down." And I went, there's nothing new or original in most of the stuff that I've done. I'm just the one who's willing to write it all down. And that's where the next book came from. Because the next one that I wrote by myself, Sight Reading 101, Denise said, we need something for schools where we have like somebody that's really experienced, maybe a band director who's got one period of choir, that where you explain how to teach sight reading, like go through the steps, because it's not being taught a lot in a lot of colleges. Hate to throw y'all under the bus, but they're coming out not knowing what order to teach things in. Sorry, college people. Okay. We need to talk. Not all college people, but a lot. And I went, well, I can write it down. And Denise went, okay. So I wrote it down in the beginning of that book. And then we made student examples that are reproducible in the back of the book. So that was the last one. And or that was the second one. And then the third one, the Making Sight Reading Fun Games book. I've been playing those games with kids since I very first started teaching because a lot of times I never had an assistant till the last 2 years I taught, but occasionally I had more than 300. One year I had 340 by myself, but I always had more than 200 by myself. So games came from I've got to be able to evaluate what these kids can do, but I can't grade it all. It's too much grading. I can't keep up with that. And that's where the games came from. And my dear friend and college roommate, Amy Alabon, taught me this long ago when we were in college. She was really good about anybody that she sort of admired, she would contact them. She would call people on the phone and ask them questions when we were just, dumb 20-year-olds. And she always did that with people she looked up to. So I got better about it. And I'd met Emily Crocker because she was Emily Crocker, in passing. We knew who each other was. And one day I sent Emily an email and went, people keep saying I should get these games published. Here's the first chapter. What do you think? And she went, it took her about 2 days and she went, this is great. Hal Leonard's going to publish this. And I was like, oh God, I have to write it all down. Oh no. Now I actually have to do this.
Yeah.
And I wrote it all down. And that's where a lot of that stuff comes from. And then when I retired, there was lots of other stuff that was in the laptop. And that's kind of where my Teachers Pay Teachers store came in. It's called Choir Hacks by Mary Jane Phillips. Buy from me, yay!
Yeah.
But I was like, there's a lot of stuff that's just sitting here in this laptop for like 3 years that it doesn't need to die with me. I got the sight reading stuff out. Now, I wonder if anybody would want this if I put it on Teachers Pay Teachers. And I sat down with my friend Jody Koch, who grew up in Birdville. I watched Jody grow up. She was never my student, but she kind of was because I watched her grow up. And Jody already had, the huge choir queen thing going on. And Jody and I sat at a Cheddar's a couple summers ago, and she walked me through it. I mean, she was like, do this, then do this, then do this. How's how you do this? Because I'm like the least computer literate person ever in the history of the world. I'm terrible. And Jody's like, no, do this, and then do this, and then do this. And it's, a nice I have friends, who live in the business world and stuff like that. And they talk about passive income. They have businesses and stuff. And I'm like, we're teachers. We're never going to like buy another house. That's
Right.
that's not how my life works. But it's, nice little passive income. And then there's just a part of me that I love helping and telling somebody else. Honestly, some of it's just telling other people what to do. Sometimes I just look at things and go, I have to start typing. You can't do that. I just
Yeah.
part of me that's like, oh, please don't do that. Please do this. But a lot of it is just this. I want to be. I like helping, and a lot of times I just see what the answer is, and it doesn't take 30 seconds to just type and go, here, do this, and that's kind of where it came. That's kind of where it comes from. So yeah, but Jody was an incredible help in getting the whole teachers pay teachers. And I've told lots of people, I'm like, don't let stuff that you or that's really good just sit in your computer.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
just upload it all. The one that sells the most, I'm surprised, is actually I always thought I did a really good job of breaking down music theory concepts and teaching one every 3 weeks. I had a real system for how I did that. And that I kept looking at, sitting there on my computer and going, I don't think this needs to die with me. I figured out how to do this. It really is not that hard. And I put it in my Teachers Pay Teacher store, and it literally is the thing that I sell the most of. It literally that's the biggest seller on the whole thing. And so people are like, this makes so much sense because your curriculums will do dumb stuff like they'll give you vocabulary and it's all in alphabetical order. More than once, I've been with a young teacher and they're trying to teach key signatures but they haven't taught lines and spaces yet. And I'm like, why are you doing this if you haven't taught lines and spaces? They're like, that's the order it is in the curriculum. I'm like, oh, honey, that's alphabetical order. That's not the order of the curriculum. That's just alphabetical order. Nobody told you. So
Oh no, that's great. Well, we'll be sure to link all of. I mean, there's no way we can link everything, but we'll link your Teachers Paid Teachers, and we'll definitely link the SOS book for sure as well. So you can look at the description if you want to check that out. Okay, would you like a way to create a special moment, a unique memory that only you and your students can share? Is there a certain audience you will be performing for, and you want just the right type of music for the occasion? Or perhaps you're just in need of a piece that has a specific voicing, range, or theme that you haven't been able to find anywhere else. I mean, last time I checked, publishers weren't scrambling to create music for a bassoon, alto voice, and accordion trio, but maybe that's what you're looking for. No matter the reason or the instrumentation, I would love to fulfill your music needs in the form of a commission. If you're unfamiliar with what commissioning me would look like, or even any composer for that matter, you can learn more about the process at christianfortnermusic.com/commission. This includes info such as the step-by-step timeline, payment options, and more. I want to work with you so that we can create a memorable experience for everyone involved, including you, myself, the performers, and the listeners that will hear the music for years to come. Because remember, you never know whose lives will be changed for the better because of the music that came into existence because of you. So are you ready to make a new memory through new music? I am. Take the first step by filling out a commission request form at christianfortnermusic.com/commission. Hope to hear from you soon. Is there anything else on your heart that you want to share with our
the
listeners?
one more thing that I would love to, because I wrote myself little notes, and the only thing I haven't talked about yet is how important it is this time of year to build tone with your choirs. Don't think that you wait until later in the year till they get better. Tone is the airbrush that makes everything better. And a lot of teachers these days appear to me to think that they're song teachers. We're voice teachers. And we're usually the only voice teacher our students are ever going to have. Let that sink in a minute. If you're your student's only voice teacher and you just think warming them up is a couple minutes at the beginning of every class and then moving into whatever, you're not doing it right. You've got to teach tone. And if you don't know what that middle school tone can be, the best way to learn that is to find great examples of middle school choirs. We all know what a great college choir sounds like. We all know what a great professional choir sounds like. But there is greatness in middle school choral music, and it's all around you. Look for recordings from honor choirs and recordings from your region choirs, things like that, and listen to that sound and get that sound in your head. Because until the choir in your head sounds great, the choir in front of you never will, because you don't have a goal to go towards. And then, very wise choir director said this to me once. I didn't make this up, but I thought this was wise. The minute the choir in your head sounds like the choir in front of you, then the choir in your head has to get better. You've got to go listen to more music. You've got to go get more mentors. You've got to expand what your sound is like, which means you're never going to get it perfect. but you have to have such a robust, healthy tone quality in your head that you know immediately, oh, wait, I got to fix that. I got to fix that. I got to fix that. And that is literally, it is, I judge a lot of contests, and literally tone is what makes people forgive you of all the other sins. You can be absolved of many things when your choir sounds pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, that means that at the beginning, you're teaching lots and lots and lots of unison. That's how you unify tone, that's how you unify vowels. Do not ever think your choir is too good for unison. Back in the TCU days in the mid 80s, Ron Shirey every year started us TCU chorale with a unison piece, and it wasn't like we did it for a week. We didn't usually sing it on the fall concert, but we sang it all the way up to the fall concert. Sometimes it was an Italian art song. Sometimes it was Drink to Me Only with Thine Eyes. Sometimes it was something unison from Randall Thompson's Frostiana. But it was unison, and he would beat that tone into us. And that made such an impression on my ears back then. It's like, oh no, you have to do this no matter what the level of the ensemble is. So if for something like TCU Chorale needs to do that, then clearly our middle school kids need to do that. And a lot of people think that moving to parts is how kids learn to be better, and they move to parts too soon. I will always say kids never learn how to polish music until they learn how to polish unison, until they work on the tone and the vowels and the musicality. And then when they know how to do that, their work ethic changes because they know what that sounds like. They don't just want to go to parts just so they can sing at a bunch of parts. They want it to sound good. And they won't fight you on, well, we need to be singing more parts. We need to, fill in the blank, whatever. I never had kids care how many parts they were singing in. They cared how they sounded. And you get forgiven for a multitude of sins when that's in place. So now is the time. By building up to the fall concert, the first time that your kids stand in front of people, the parents should be saying, wow, y'all sounded good. Not, oh, that was great, but wow, you sounded good. People that don't know anything about choir, that just it just sounds good because you're making such a healthy tone, and that doesn't mean everything's going to be in tune. That doesn't mean there's not going to be a wrong note, but the overall arcing tone is the first thing. If that's not beautiful and that's not healthy, nothing else you do really matters.
Yeah, the tone sets the tone.
The tone sets the tone. One of the last years I taught, I had a not real strong varsity girls choir, and we at UIL in sight reading, they messed up the same place. The sopranos missed the do fa both times. And I walked out of the sight reading room with my fine arts director, and he looked at me and I looked at him, and I go, that was such a big fat two. Oh, that was a big fat two. There is no way that is not a two. He goes, well, I thought the same thing. I go in the office and I'm standing there waiting, and the scores come back 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And I'm just staring at it because they didn't earn that one. They didn't. And he looks at me and I look at him. He goes, you get by them with more because of that tone than anybody I've ever known. He goes, they couldn't stand to give you a 2 because they sound so good. And I'm like, yeah, isn't it great? When I took the trophy out to the bus, like the girls were surprised. And I told them the same thing. I'm like, think about how much time we spend on making it sound pretty. Well, you were dead wrong on notes, but they sure sounded pretty. And somebody just couldn't stand to give you a lower score. And
Wow.
a lot of people just think, okay, right notes and right rhythms. No, you got to, if you're teaching more than 8 or 16 measures in a day, then you're a song teacher. You got to do small pieces. You're a voice teacher, not a song teacher. So the tone is everything.
Yeah, that reminds me of I don't know if you're familiar with like the 80-20 principle, but it's like 20, if you do the 20% of one thing, that's going to solve 80% of everything else, and tone is that 20% from what I've heard across the board.
Tone is like, if you've ever seen movies that are kind of in soft focus, they call it marshmallow focus, and nobody really appears to have, like, bags under their eyes, or the wrinkles are gone, everything's gone. That's what tone is. Tone is your airbrush. It airbrushes out, it photoshops all the other
Yeah.
things. It really does. It gets rid of a multitude of other sins when the tone is pretty. And it's all, if the tone is beautiful, you are teaching healthy vocal technique, which is sort of, rule one. That's kind of, those are kind of the two things that first, do no harm. You don't want to do any harm to their little voices. And the if you're teaching beautiful tone, then there's a very good chance that you're not, but just write notes and write rhythms, that's not it.
Right. Well, I love what you said about the importance of learning unison and placing importance on that. If you're listening to this, this will actually be in a future episode. But we interviewed, I think it was Bryce Gage. We interviewed at Marble Falls, and he talks a lot about that. He said he's like, I have my most advanced groups, and I even have a group going to TMEA this year, and I still have this group learn unison pieces all the
Absolutely.
time. Like we always do at least one unison piece because they need to have that.
One of my great mentors, Brad White, that taught in Birdville forever at Richland High School and Birdville High School. Brad is one of the best teachers of high school men's voices that's ever been in Texas. Brad, every day, worked on falsetto with every boy. I mean, they literally started their warm up every day, and every tenor bass choir part of the day was singing the melody of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. That first octave leap. And, with JV boys at the beginning of the year, it was a hot mess. But he would do it at different speeds and pulling through phrases, and the same thing over and over and over again. And you didn't see them get mad because they heard the tone growing and they heard what happened. I saw him when he taught the TCU Frog Corps, which is the men's volunteer choir at TCU that he started 15 years ago. They did the same thing. It's that unison. That's really the only way to unify tone. And in the immortal words of Denise Eaton, if they can't sing it in unison, what in the world makes you think that they are going to sing it in parts? You're delusional. That's Denise's words. You are delusional
That's great.
if you think that parts are going to work if unison's not there. It's all just little stepping stones. And that's why it's fun to teach middle school. I probably would have been a good high school teacher, but I'm a great middle school teacher because I like watching the progress from nothing to something more than I like watching the progress from something to something better. I love looking at a kid, who didn't match pitch when they got to me in sixth grade, make region choir in eighth grade. And in one case, make all state choir, later on, and watch that progression and just go, oh, I had a hand in that progression, and knowing that if you go those little steps one at a time, that it'll pay off for you.
Another thing I want to mention that you mentioned this a minute ago, but I want to bring it back because I think that's so good what you said about your musical vision, what you hear in your head, always needs to be one step ahead of what you're currently at with your group. And when I heard that funny enough, I actually immediately thought of when I compose as a composer, because
Exactly.
I need to know what I'm writing in my head before I actually write it down. Now, does that always happen? Well, no, of course not. They can influence, each can influence the other, but the moment I do write something that is matching what I've heard in my head, it's like, okay, those are always the best. I feel like the best music that I write whenever I'm able to do that. But then it's like, okay, well, that forces my brain to now think of something even better, right?
Absolutely. Well, it's the Mozart effect. The greatest, at least in my mind, the greatest, just most God gifted musician that ever lived. If you've ever seen his manuscript, Beethoven's was wrinkled up and there were things marked out. And, everybody else has X's over entire pages. Mozart's looks like it was printed on finale because it was all in his head before he wrote anything down. And I can't even really conceive of that. But if you look at it, there's no there's no mistakes. It's all done ahead of time. I was coming back from a TMEA when I'd been teaching about 8 years and really kind of liked the way my choir sounded. And I bought my first Indianapolis Children's Chorus CD recording back when they were on CDs. And I unwrapped it and popped it in my car driving home from Love Field in Dallas. And I had to pull the car over because I kept looking at the cover and those kids were clearly the same age as the kids that I was teaching, but they didn't sound anything like the kids I was teaching. And my kids were making ones. We're making ones and we're being successful and getting kids in all region. And I just sat there looking, going, I didn't know that was possible until I knew it was possible. And then that's when I started buying more recordings. And then 12, 13, 14 years later, my girls, the best girls I ever taught, we were doing Randall Stroop's Resonant and Loudy Boost at Christmas, which is hard, but it was Christmas, so there wasn't any UIL judges, so it was safe. And there was one part they kept rushing. And I went, ooh, I'm going to go find the recording of Nebraska Children's Chorus where Stroop is directing this and see if I can figure out what he did not to rush there. And I'd listened to it before, but I listened to it again, and the Nebraska Children's Chorus was rushing in the exact same place as my kids were that I'd never heard before. It never occurred to me before that just seems to be a place where we all seem to rush and get over yourself and move. Sometimes you just find out, oh yeah, you can't fix that, or everybody rushes there and you can't. But that tone quality, I was blessed with growing up in great choirs. So I had great stuff in my ears to start off with, but it had to keep going, and it keeps going still. I've had people more than once at a convention go, why are you in this workshop, or why are you in this? And they're like, you're retired, you don't need to sit through a sight reading workshop or a tone workshop or somebody's concert. I'm like, oh no, I'm going to be, you know, until I'm in the home and nobody will take me to the conventions anymore. I'm still going to be listening and doing all the things because it's got to get better. That's how that grows and gets better. But you're exactly right. If as a composer, you don't just sit down and with a blank piece of paper and just start writing. There's got to be something there.
Yep. Yep. Even if it's just a single thing,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Wow. Well, Mary Jane, this has been amazing. This has been such a great conversation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool. I'm so glad.
But hey, if anyone is listening to this and for whatever reason they've been, hiding under a rock or something and have not seen you on social media or anywhere else, how can somebody connect with you if they're going through some of the things we talked about and they need your help?
There's two different ways on Facebook. My Facebook name is Mary Jane Phillips, which is my maiden name. And then my business page is Choir Hacks. That's also on Facebook. And then the name of my Teachers Pay Teachers store is Choir Hacks by Mary Jane Phillips. So literally pretty much if you type in Choir Hacks and part of my name on Google, it just starts to show up in the right places. And someday if I ever figure it out, I'll probably need the help of my college age daughter or Jody or somebody. Maybe someday, I'll do TikTok stuff and Instagram. But right now I'm too old and I have to do old people social media, which is right. Facebook. That's what my daughter calls it, old people social media. But that's what I'm doing now.
So I have to ask, you're always creating new materials, whether that's through a publisher or through yourself, your Teachers Pay Teachers. Are there any new materials in the works that are coming out that you can tease for us?
Briley Music just picked up. It had to disappear off my Teachers Pay Teachers store. Okay. Because I had something on my Teachers Pay Teachers store that was called 6 Acapella Canons. And it was basically, we all know there's not enough acapella songs, grade 1 for either tenor bass or treble choirs. And I kept thinking, rounds are often the way to go with your little average non-varsity treble choir. But a lot of them have weird words, like "ah, poor bird." Mm-hmm. It's great, but kids don't want to sing about that. So I went, since time began, we've been stealing melodies and changing the words. Half of the songs in hymnals are actually Old English drinking songs. That's where they came from because that's what the population knew. They knew the tune. So they would sing one thing in the pub on Saturday night and they would sing the exact same tune on Sunday morning in church with sacred words. And I kept going, I could change some of these rounds that everybody does that don't already have Italian or Latin text. I could change it. And I kept thinking about Ah Poor Bird was the one that kept sticking in my head. And finally I went, and I kind of have sinus, so this is not going to sound great, but just think about this. I went, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, eleison.
There you go.
Brilliant.
And then I went, wait, okay, then I just make it into a round. So this
Yeah.
thing that's coming out from Briley, there's 6 of them. They're all going to be, I think they're all going to be published in one thing. And like literally every one of them is a round that you've heard before. They're all a cappella. In each one, they sing the round in unison, then they sing the round in a round, then they sing the round in unison again. And then I added like a little tiny like coda, for lack of a better, 2 or 3 measures just to make it sound finished. The longest one lasts maybe 55 seconds. I'm like, I wrote them for non-varsity treble choirs at UIL to have a cappella songs. And Christy just called me earlier this summer. Christy Jones, who's in charge of Riley now, she student taught with me. So she called me. She goes, "We're publishing it." I was like, "Yay!" And there's another one she's looking at. That's actually on the. I've also got some boys' music on the Teachers Pay Teachers store. I've got some spirituals that some people have done at UIL a cappella because again, I can't write an accompaniment to save my life, and a couple of old English folk songs that I taught as boys solos over the years. And I went, this would be a good a cappella song. And she's looking at those too. But the canons, I've actually already signed the contract. So I left it on the Teachers Pay Teachers store until the day the contract came through. And then I went in the Teachers Pay Teachers store and deleted it. And then I signed the contract. So everything's legal. But there are some people that have the original one, from the Teachers Pay Teachers store. I'm like, hey, you bought it before they ever,
Yeah.
so you're
Sure.
fine. You still
Yeah,
got permission
yeah.
to copy. It's not your fault.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
great.
I go, now it would be nice if, later on that you decided you were going to buy the other one too. But yeah, that one's coming out and hopefully that'll be like either at TMEA or summer of next year. And we'll try and get those added to the PML. Like when they open that window to get things added to the PML, it's kind of a process, but I'm going to try and get every single one of those added to the PML because I'm super practical and I write to fill a need. These are not life-changing works of art, but they're helpful. They're helpful and they're nice. And several people used them last year at UIL and had good success with them. So it worked well. So that's what's coming up that I know of at least. So
Yay, that's exciting.
Yay. Well, Mary Jane, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
well, I think this is a really good thing y'all are doing. This is the more of this there is, especially for the younger generation. They're getting a lot of their information from social media and from podcasts and things like this, and it's it's the same old information. We're building the house the same way. You got to have a foundation and walls and a roof. It's just how you decorate the house. And we got to make sure that everybody always remembers you got to build the house before you decorate it. And some people are getting ahead of themselves. They want to teach in 14 parts, but nobody's matching pitch yet. You know, or like they're working on a song for the first time and they have kids crescendo on a long note that's not a matched pitch. And then they want to know why they're getting scores they get or comments they get from other choir directors. It's like, no, you're not being musical pulling an unmatched pitch. You didn't do the work ahead of time to get everybody matching pitch. It's that kind of stuff. So I think y'all are doing a good thing, just getting people who have been there, done that, to kind of say, okay, here's the things that have to happen first to make everything else work. I think y'all are doing good work. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So how many years is this for you, Kara? How many years have you been in middle school now?
This is year 4 that I'm going on. So, and
That's
this year's
awesome.
I just feels like it's been a lot better. Just because you just learn every year, and I'm thinking about like for my first year of teaching and all of the classroom management stuff, and I did
Well,
all
and
of
it was in the
that.
middle of COVID. I mean, it was just,
Yeah,
all of it.
yeah, and I did all of that, but it wasn't repetitive, and so mm, the classroom management part was just a little chaotic, and so I've kind of just tweaked some things over the years, and I'm by no means perfect, but I feel like I'm kind of finally getting that groove. And
I remember it was like year 3. It was really year 4, 5
mm-hmm,
where I felt like I hit my stride. It's like, oh, I don't feel like I'm like always just in a panic, about what's going to happen next. It was year 4, 5 around in there when I started to get my feet under me and go, okay, this is starting to make sense now, and what I'm doing is working and all that. So that means you're exactly on track, because that's what a lot of people say. It's right around year 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there that you start to go, okay, I feel like I know what I'm doing. And the problem is so many people leave before they ever get there.
right, yes,
Yeah, yeah,
And that's what hopefully things like this can help keep people in the game long enough to actually get your feet under you. Because some people, when they first feel that feeling of, oh, this is scary and this is hard, they leave before they ever really know what they're doing.
yeah,
mm-hmm,
yeah. I feel like whenever you were, first year teacher, like we heard a lot of, which obviously is true. It's like, hey, first year is going to be hard. You just got to get through your first year. But really, it's like, okay, no, your first 3 or 4 years is really when you'll actually settle in, is what we're hearing a lot now.
The reason the second year is easier is literally only because all your documents are made.
yeah,
If you were
Yeah.
smart and you've saved them in the computer. Literally, like that alone, that you're not creating every single thing from scratch, is like the big upgrade to year 2. And then by year 3, especially if it's all been in the same place, you know the kids well,
mm-hmm,
and you know their voices, and then you've started to sort of figure out what works in your community and what
yeah,
works, what needs to happen and what doesn't need to happen. Because like the social events you can have in a Title One school are way different than the social events you can have if you teach in South Lake Carroll and you teach a bunch of professional athletes kids. It's just, things are different. You just figure out how to do things differently. So you're zipping right along just like you're
mm-hmm.
supposed
That's
to
right.
be. That's
Oh,
exactly
that's
how that's
encouraging.
supposed to
Yeah.
work. That's exactly how that's supposed to work. And I think the longer you teach, I know the longer I taught, the less I was worried about somebody thinking I was stupid for asking a question. And I got way better at asking questions. I just got way, way better at saying, I don't know what I'm doing. Get over here. And because I think when you're younger, you're worried that you're not good at all of it. And I think that's what you get better at the older you get. You're much more likely to ask for help. At least I am, and just go, I don't have any idea how to do that. Like when Victor said to me he would write an accompaniment, I was like, oh, that'd be the greatest thing ever. And he laughed. He goes, yeah, I'm kind of good at that. I was like,
yeah.
you're Victor Johnson. You're really good at that.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't even sort of pretend that I'm good at that. So that would be fantastic, Victor.
Well, and I do have to thank you as well, because I've been using your materials since I started teaching, and it's been such a big help. And I kind of felt lost my first year, but the SOS book just kind of helped me sequence like how I'm supposed to do all of that stuff. And
Nobody teaches it to you. They
no,
don't teach you that sequencing. And I'll tell you, there are 2 people actually in Texas right now that I know of, at least, that are teaching it. John Wayman is teaching it at UTA. I've been in the music ed classes and I've seen he's teaching it. Now, whether they're all listening, I mean, there's always, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. The other one that absolutely will teach it is Thomas Wren at Texas State, because has just been in the classroom. But I think there's so much of this highfalutin this going on when most people, their first job right out of the chute is going to be a middle school job or a high school assistant job when they're teaching beginners. And if you don't have beginner knowledge, that's not your fault. You went to college, but nobody taught it to you. So I'm glad it works. I usually tell baby teachers all the time. I tell them, I'm like, don't worry about having like original thoughts your first year that you teach. Don't worry about original thoughts. Just do it in the order that the book goes. And then after you've taught a year or two, you're gonna look at it and go, oh yeah, I can skip this page. I know I don't really need to do this. And now that's where you are. You're getting to that place where, oh yeah, I know what to skip. I know where to jump over, and where I don't really have to be. Like those pages in the SOS book that are in the key of C, it's really for people in other states outside of Texas because they have to be able to read and see because that's what they read in for their contest. So it's like those are the pages you can kind of skip over, but you don't say that in front of everybody. You just say, that's the way that's the way that happened. So I'm glad it helps. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have you used those snap cards? You ever used the snap cards?
Yes, I have.
Teresa, those things are fantastic because she just lifted everything from the UIL. It's every like little pattern that happens at UIL that's hard. She just lifted them all and put them on flashcards. That's genius. And I've told her that 1,000 times. In fact, I told her I'm really kind of jealous that I did not think of those flashcards because I've stood at the Briley booth with people looking at the SOS flashcards and the snap cards, and somebody will go, which one should I buy? I go, this actually does not help me in any way, but if you are only buying one, buy the snap cards. They're like, wait, you wrote the other ones? I'm like, yes, I did, but the snap cards are better. Now, if you're buying both, they're both great, but the snap cards are better. And they're like, I even said it to Teresa once. She was like, I can't believe you just did that. I'm like, I'm really jealous. I kind of like think about it sometimes and go, I don't know why I didn't think of that. But you thought of it first, so good for you.
Hey, we've got, man, it's been an hour and a half now.
Oh
that went by really fast though.
Zoom.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being on here. We really appreciate it, and it's been great, and we'll have to have you on again. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, y'all take care and have a good day in Abilene, and hopefully it's not too hot. It's like the face of the sun still here, so y'all take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Beyond the Measure, a podcast for music educators. We hope you learned something that will help you stress less about how to teach so that you can focus more on who you're teaching. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a rating and review, subscribe, and share this podcast with other music educators. See you in the next one.